Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm your host, Matthew Mugno, joined today by probably the most popular figure in the New York Rangers community on X, online, everywhere. The Under Review podcast as well. He started that a few years back. And of course, the pregame spaces that pretty much every Ranger fan on the internet is aware of. I'm joined by Stat Boy Steve, and it's a pleasure to finally have you on after years of going back and forth online.
Yeah, good afternoon to you, and happy to be on. And I'm always happy to talk some hockey, man. So
And it's like the best time of the year. We're getting to that American Thanksgiving point of the year, and I appreciate that you're joining me on the time change too.
yeah, it's almost 10 p.m. I'm traveling for work, so I don't have my usual setup, but I'm up for the game tonight against the Colorado Avalanche anyway. So yeah, you're not keeping me from any sleep. So it's all
You know
good.
what? I think we should start with the Winter Classic jerseys. You and I were chopping that up right before we started recording, and we'll get to the game for sure. It'll be an interesting one tonight out in Colorado, but yeah, Winter Classic jersey drop 2026 uniforms for January 1st. You hinted at kind of how the jersey and the matchup, I personally think it was kind of a stretch. I know they want the New York poll for Florida, but I thought I liked the jerseys. I was hoping they wouldn't be the Miami Vice style that some fans wanted, but I want to hear your take on the uniform, if you like it, and of course, like what you would want to have improved on.
Yeah, so with the Centennial jersey that they introduced this season, the powder blue with the white lettering, this is basically a reverse version of that, which makes sense. You stick to the Centennial theme in your Centennial season, and it's a really nice jersey. Like let's start with that. I like the off-white base. I like the powder blue lettering. I love how they fully committed to that Apple logo now that was only on the hem for the Centennial, but it's now actually a full-blown patch. I would buy a T-shirt with that on the front, by the way, like front and center. So it's a really nice jersey. However, and this is probably going to Ranger fans are probably going to disagree with me on this, but the Rangers fan base and the Rangers organization are very loyal to the whole diagonal lettering on the front, whether it says New York or whether it says Rangers. That's the way the Rangers have always done it, and I get it. It's part of their identity. It's tradition. It's You almost cannot go wrong with that. Now they tried a little bit different with the NYR in the Stadium Series a year and a half ago, but I think for outdoor games, the Rangers should go outside the box a bit. To me, the best jersey they've had still is the 2012 Winter Classic when they played in Philadelphia. Um, I would have loved to see a powder blue version of that with the logo on the front, the old logo from 100 years ago. And I'm pretty sure they could have worked something out with the Panthers like they did with the Sabres in 2018, even though they're the road team, or do what they did against the Red Wings at the Garden on Sunday, where you play red versus blue like they did in the 2014 Winter Classic with the Leafs and the Red Wings. So there was definitely an opening there to do it, but um, having a reverse of the Centennial jersey, you can't really go wrong with it. So it's still a really good choice.
I thought the same thing. In my mind, for some reason, my thoughts were just solely on if they were going to go with like a Miami vibe, if they were going to go kind of like that new frontier. Um, I think what was cool to see was the Panthers went old school too. I mean, it's like a Fox old school, but I think it's based in like a whatever the Sun Belt League was years ago. And they also went with like the leather pads. That is the one thing I'll tell you. I do wish the Rangers went with like the leather gloves and
The
pants. I'm
Burt
not sure if you're a fan of those, but I love those.
Yeah, I love how Detroit went with that. The brown gloves, the brown pants. I think that looks really cool. I'm not overly upset that the Rangers haven't. I think the jerseys themselves are really nice. Um, and yeah, the Miami Vice theme, it worked really well for the All Star game a couple of years ago. It's just not something
Mhm.
I want to see in a Winter Classic. A Stadium Series game they're usually a little bit more. They take a little bit more of a risk. You know, they're more out there with the designs in Stadium Series games. Winter
Mhm.
Classic, they usually throw it back to like vintage designs, like the Seattle Kraken a couple of years ago when they played in the Winter Classic. Now the Kraken don't have history, but Seattle as a city does. So they went with a Seattle Metropolitans inspired jersey for their Winter Classic. But a Winter Classic should always be a throwback to something from like 100 years ago if you can. That's why I kind of wanted a powder blue with the old logo, the same logo they had in 2012, and the Florida Panthers jersey. My first thought was it kind of reminded me of those Chinese New Year warm up jerseys some teams have. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
the logo had kind of like that vibe to it, but yeah, no, I really like the Rangers jersey. And like I said, you know, that Apple logo, I really hope they lean into that a little bit more in the future because that could be a really good alternate logo, like they had with the metallic Rangers logo in the 90s. I don't know if you remember that one, the shoulder patch on the original Liberties.
Oh, yes, yes, yep.
Yeah. Of course, that was never a main feature on the chest, but like with the, I would buy a hat that has that Apple logo on it. I would 100% buy a hat. Yes.
I actually I'm not sure if it's just the Apple, but I think there was stuff. I scrolled through quick before when they released all of the merch, so we'll have
Mhm.
to double check and see if that's available because
Yeah.
hopefully you get that if that is your wish. I like it too. I thought the Apple was cool. I like that the 100, like the Centennial crest is on the helmet.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, you can't really go wrong. I don't love the way the jerseys look on Fanatics to begin with, so I feel like that also kind of hurts the quality of the look. But gauging your opinion on that, obviously they're locked into this deal now. But what was your favorite jersey system?
What do you mean by jersey system? Like the manufacturer or?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's really tough to say because prior to 2005, 2006, each team had their own partnership with manufacturers. You had teams that used Nike, teams that used Starter, CCM, Pro Player. It was all over the place. And then in 2006, it was a league-wide contract for Reebok, and then in 2017, it became Adidas, and now Fanatics. I think the Adidas shoulders I really like with the dimple pattern. That's a very distinguishable feature of a jersey. But when it comes to quality, it's really hard to pick a jersey ahead of the 90s CCM jerseys. Like the quality of the CCM jerseys in the 90s was so much better than the other brands that they had. I have a white Liberty starter and a white Liberty CCM jersey. And when you have them side by side, the difference is crazy. When they are the same jersey worn by the same team in the same season, but it's a different quality. Different. It's a drop in quality when you go away from CCM back in those days.
When did you become a Ranger fan?
Early, I've told this story so many times. I should put it up on a website and give people the link so they can
Yeah.
read it. So I grew up in the Netherlands, early 90s. My parents were going through a divorce, a lot of fighting. So every afternoon when I came home from school, I would go up into my parents' bedroom, turn on the TV, and watch TV while they were fighting it out in the living room or in the kitchen. And there was a TV station called Screen Sport back then that showed NHL highlights. So I just started watching NHL highlights 4 p.m. every day. I came home from school quarter to four, so it lined up perfectly. Um, Started to get into it. My dad bought me a NHL video game. I think it was on the Super Nintendo, Brett Hull Hockey. He went to the American bookstore to buy me the New York Post so I could read up on it. And the reason I picked the Rangers, and this is gonna sound really lame maybe, but I thought as a 7 year old that it was really interesting that they were the only team without a logo on their jersey. There were some teams.
That's a pretty cool reason for someone as young as you were.
Yeah, because of course the Penguins had like the diagonal lettering on their alternate jersey, but their home jersey still had the logo. I just thought it was weird that the Rangers never had a logo on their jersey, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And you kind of want to know the reason behind it, so you just start following the team. And then 2 years later, they won the Stanley Cup. Like once that happened, it was etched. Like I wasn't gonna change that. So yeah, that's how it started.
Forgive me for making you rehash the story. I know. I feel like you should put it up on like a pin post. Like this is who I am and this is what I'm about. Because otherwise, Steve, I mean, your material, it's like it never misses. And it's my favorite thing, like in the timeline. It's right up there with the reporters. Like it's must see content. So when did you start really leaning into it?
So I've always been like really into like statistics and finding anomalies in things. When I was a kid, I would write down like the World Cup winners of the FIFA World Cup from 1930 to 1994 and try to find patterns, you know. So back in 2015, I was dating a girl from Long Island and I was telling her all this stuff and she looked at me and she goes, you need to create a Twitter account because you need to just tweet this out so you can get it off your chest and like jokingly said, and don't bother me with it. So 2015, 2016, I think I set up a Twitter account, started tweeting random stats. It didn't gain any traction at all. I remember Matt Pumple scoring a hat trick and I tweeted out that Matt Pomple was the first waiver claim for the Rangers to score a hat trick since Jeff Thomas in 2002, and it got like 13 likes. So then in I think
That's
20,
golden when you just start.
I know. I mean, I thought, in my head, I was like, "Oh, this is gonna take off. This is such a great statistic. It's such a great stat," but it never really did. And then I started a new job in Vienna, which allowed me to travel a lot for work. So I started going to like, junior hockey games and international under 20 tournaments, meeting up with players, and that's when my Twitter account really took off for a different reason. But I'm still doing the stats anyway. But yeah, it's just I don't know how to explain it. It's just something in my head when the Rangers score a power play goal in the first minute of the game. I'm like, I wonder when was the last time we scored a power play goal that quickly into a game. I grab my laptop, I look it up, and usually within 5 to 10 minutes, I have the answer, and then I turn it into a tweet. And sometimes it gets 200 likes, sometimes it get 800 likes, but at least I get it off my chest. So yeah, I have my ex girlfriend to thank for that.
Curiosity creating the cat. I love that. So, you know what? Let's jump right in, Steve. Obviously, the video that circled the internet, Steve Pappas. Ironically, he was like a senior in college at Quinnipiac when I was a freshman. So we got to know each other a little bit now, a little more so after the fact. I feel like everybody is starting to really know each other on, in the Rangers universe online. But he tweeted that video of JT Miller, and I think in a lot of ways that personifies the like the time frame this team is in between last season and this year. A lot of the conversations are about effort. They're about how the team is built, the construct.
Mhm.
So overall, what have your thoughts been so far this season? If you could summarize them.
Um, I think this team is better on the road than they are, and sorry, they're better than they are at home. They're not as good as they are on the road, if that makes sense. That they've had a really good start on the road. What is it, like 8-1-1 or 8-2-1 now after they lose to Vegas in regulation? At home, they're
Mhm.
1-8-1. It's a ridiculous split if you look at it. It's
Only the
it's
Rangers could do that, by the way.
it's crazy. And I remember years ago under Ellen Vigneault, we referred to the Rangers as the Road Warriors because they were better on the road than they were at home. And it wasn't this
Yep.
crazy. Um, but so far this season, there have been some bright spots. Noah Laba is an easy one to point out. Alexis Lafreniere recently had a 10-point stretch over 10 games. Cooley had a 9-point stretch over 9 games. So there's definitely some positives to look at. Mika Zibanejad playing better than he had in previous years. But the one thing that hangs over this team right now is JT Miller. And like I made a joke about that video where when you quit your job and you still have to come in for the next 4 weeks. The effort wasn't there, and we can argue what the reason behind it is. Was it a long? It was at the end of a 1 minute shift. So on that note, you can say, yeah, it was a long shift, but it was also his second shift of the period. So he should have more in the tank for a second shift of the period. You can talk about whether or not it's injury related, and then you get into the really interesting conversation of it, because I maintain that the Rangers are terrible at managing injuries. They have been for years.
Mhm.
Um, not giving players enough time to recover from injuries has been hurting this team for years. We now see it with Will Borgen, right? He's injured, he's out of the lineup, comes back in the next game, and now today he's day to day again. Clear example of the Rangers pushing someone back.
Mhm.
Um, they've done it with Jacob Trouba a couple of years ago when they went to the Stanley Cup Finals. Oh, sorry, to Eastern Conference Finals in 2024. The go-to move was to place Trouba on PIR, use the cap space at the deadline to acquire a player better than Wenberg or Roslovic, and
Mhm.
then once the playoffs start, you activate Jacob Trouba and you go into the playoffs with a much better team. But the Rangers didn't, and we've had the situation last year with Kreider where. And here's where I stand with Miller, and people disagree with me on this, but I think you should just place him on IR, let him recover. If it requires surgery, it requires surgery. Let him have surgery, because the way he's playing now, he's not contributing anything. And just fighting through the season with an injured JT Miller is not going to do you any favors. But deep down inside, I also know that that's not what's going to happen. So they're just going to try and find a way to get through this and hope that JT Miller can recover in between games. But the problem is that the Rangers don't have enough depth to have an injured JT Miller in the lineup right now.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
So,
funny. I actually thought the oversight was as honestly astounding that when Vincent Trocheck was out, aside from some of the things that were pretty obvious, goal scoring and things of that nature, I thought it surprised me to see how many folks forgot that Vincent Trocheck was not in the lineup for a month.
mhm.
Um, but with that stated, they're playing the number one team. By the time this is out, we'll know the result of this game. I think a lot of the conversations in the Rangers sphere right now, it's funny, it's not really game by game. It really has been those like overarching storylines of injuries and injury management, JT Miller and his leadership. And like you just mentioned, they shuffled the top six again tonight. It really does feel like this is a team that it really has to generate most of its offense from those players that really haven't so far. For a long time on this show, I've been critical of Mika Zibanejad. Um, giving credit to kind of the player and where he's shown that he's capable, maybe in the past, and where he was at last season and now this year. Where do you stand with Mika Zibanejad?
um, like I was as surprised as anyone else with the way he's played so far this season. He's going to the middle of the ice. He's finishing his checks. He's a pain in the ass to play against right now. He checks players into the bench. He's disrupting defensemen when they have the puck. This is not the Mika Zibanejad that we are used to. So I don't know what got into him, and maybe the Mike Sullivan visit to Sweden over the summer has had that big of an impact. But I'm glad it did, because whether we like it or not, the Rangers and Zibanejad are tied at the hip for 4 more seasons after this season. Now, it's a full no move clause. It's tied up in max signing bonuses. So buying him out actually costs you more money. You're
Mhm.
actually spending more cap if you buy him out, because the cap savings are less than what a minimum salary replacement would be. You would save 666,000 a year, and league minimum right now I think is 775. So
Mhm.
whether we like it or not, he's going to be a Ranger until he waives his no move clause. And his no move clause expires, I think, February 2030. So we just need to get the most out of him. JT Miller is the same is in the same situation. Contract to 2030, full no move clause. And this is where it gets tricky because Panarin is not playing the way he used to, although shaving his head has helped a little bit. But you cannot have two of your three top players underperform and expect to be competitive.
Hmm.
And Lafreniere hasn't taken the step that we all wanted him to take. Cooley is a really good middle six player, but should not be on your top line. You
Hmm.
know, on the third line, he can be a 20-goal scorer, but I don't think he has the scoring touch to be a full-time top six player. Yeah, Trocheck, I'm glad he's back, but you touch on an interesting point. If you can win games with Trocheck on IR, you can win games with JT Miller on IR now that Trocheck is back.
Hmm. I also think it proved how valuable Trocheck is to the lineup. Granted, Miller was in the lineup too, but that's a good point, Steve. And you just touched upon Artemi Panarin. That's where I was going next. Where do you think? I'm sure we'll be in touch again or on air again at some point before free agency or the trade deadline. But where do you think he'll end up?
Yeah, it's a tough situation to gauge because he's not waiving. I don't think he's going to waive his no move clause, so they're not going to be able to trade him at the deadline. I don't think the Rangers are interested in extending him, even though he's the best free agent out there.
Mhm.
Um, so you're going to have to look at a team that has the cap space to sign him to the contract that he wants, but is also able to be competitive. It sounds weird, but the only team that comes to mind is the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah. I've
And
seen that going around online too. And it's funny that's becoming like the Rangers, not even like graveyard, but the Rangers retread.
retirement.
Um, yeah, right. Like it used to be Tampa.
It used to be Tampa. It was Carolina for a short while, and
Carolina, yeah.
now it seems to be Anaheim. Yeah.
When you look back at Artemi Panarin's years in New York, do you look back and I guess right now, hindsight being 2020, do you say it was ultimately a failure? Obviously, at the time, he was the big fish, swung to the Rangers pretty much overnight over the Islanders. Do you view now his tenure in New York as ultimately a failure, or how would you grade his success in New York?
Well, it's hard to call it a failure because of the Rangers career that he's had.
Hmm.
Still has the highest points per game of any Ranger. He was the fastest Ranger to 100 points, fastest to 200, 300, 400. He's production wise, he's been probably a top five forward all time on the Rangers, and that's a team that's been around for a century now, almost a
Hmm.
century. I think the problem with Panarin is not so much Panarin as a player, but where the Rangers were in the summer of 2019 and the path that they chose. Because they should have gone full in on the rebuild at that point. You traded away Zuccarello in 2019. You traded away Miller and McDonough in 2018. You traded away Kevin Hayes in 2019 as well, by the way, for a first round pick, which you then traded back for Jacob Trouba. So the trade for Jacob Trouba, and then signing Artemi Panarin is good on paper, but I don't think it was the right move to go in that direction, if that makes sense.
I 100% agree. Context wise, I remember when the night that they pulled the trigger on the trade, Neil Pionk for with the pick from Kevin Hayes for Jacob Trouba, and my initial thoughts were, I mean, I was a senior in high school, so I was still really into it, but I wasn't like every night reading things and keeping up. I also think the media world was a little bit different. Like your stuff now, it's like instant where you're getting stats and information. At that time, it still wasn't like as popular to have all these accounts cycling out information. We also didn't have streaming, so I wasn't able to watch uh Jacob Trouba play every night. So at the time I thought to myself, well, yeah, he's got this 50-point season, but before that it wasn't there, and now we've committed this long-term contract when the Rangers were essentially just talking about the rebuild. The letter had come out a full year before that. So I agree.
Yeah,
But
and
is that
also
true? Artemi Panarin is points per game number one all time for the Rangers?
I think he still is, yeah, ahead of Yager, and he's been
Wow.
here 6+ years. The other
Hmm.
thing with Truba is that at the time, it was kind of like the Rangers were retooling that right side on defense every 2 years because
Hmm.
2015 they signed Girardi to a 6-year deal. They then bought him out in 2017 and signed Shattenkirk to a 6-year deal. They then bought out Shattenkirk in 2019 and signed Truba to a 7-year deal. So they were making the same mistake 3 times in a row, 2 years apart every time. Girardi, Shattenkirk, then Truba. Um, but yeah, like I said, Panarin is probably the second best offensive player I've seen play for the Rangers behind Yager. Um, and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Like people might not understand or agree with it, but Artemi Panarin is a top 3 all-time undrafted player. The only undrafted player that has better numbers than Artemi Panarin is Peter Stastny. And I don't count Wayne Gretzky as an undrafted player because he never entered the draft. He was already
Hmm.
playing for an NHL team when he was 18.
I always
Um,
thought that stat was a little fugazi too.
yeah, look, to go undrafted, you have to enter the draft because you can make the argument that Gordie Howe was undrafted then,
Hmm.
right?
A
But
lot
yeah,
of those players from that era. You're right.
yeah. But among players that were draft eligible and were never drafted, the only player that is better than Artemi Panarin is Peter Stastny. And people can say Adam Oates, but Artemi Panarin's a better player, individually better than Adam Oates was. So I think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. It might not be year 1, 2, or 3, but he'll get in. Um, the problem the Rangers had during Artemi Panarin's tenure as a Ranger is that they never had the supporting cast for him, where he was
Hmm.
always the number one target for opponents, especially in the playoffs where games are tighter. Panarin never had the opportunity to do what he does, and if we had a better left winger to play with Zibanejad on that other line, better than Chris Kreider, who Jack, who I do the podcast with, always says about Chris Kreider, he is an NHL, or he's a Hall of Famer within 10 feet of the crease. He's an
Hmm.
AHL or everywhere else on the ice. That's just Chris Kreider. If we had a better left winger to play in the top 6 on the other line, I think that would have taken some of the focus off of Panarin, and he could have been more impactful in the playoffs. Um,
Hmm.
I think ultimately the postseason production will be a sore subject when we talk about Panarin as a Ranger, but
Hmm.
you cannot deny the numbers that he put up.
Hmm. That's kind
So
of where I've stood too. I think, I always acknowledge, like, unfortunately in the postseason, as things clamp down, it seems like, the more to the perimeter he played, and that clearly surfaced in point totals. But at the same time, like you said, regular season wise, it was the conversation with Mitch Marner last summer. Like, you need a guy that can get you there. And I'm curious because obviously now with he's leading the UFA class, or the free agent class. Um, it'll be interesting, I think, to see what the decision ultimately is, and especially for the Rangers, because he is a player that undeniably is putting 80 to potentially 100 points up in the regular season. Is this like the New York Yankees where you can replace him with 3 players, like the Soto situation? I'm not sure if you're familiar with. Uh, do you
uh,
watch Major League Baseball?
my wife is a big Yankees fan, so
Okay.
I catch baseball from time to time.
Okay.
Up until 5 years ago, I refer to runs as points and RBIs as assists. So until my wife kept telling me that that's not what they're called, they're RBIs and they're not assists. I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. I think it's not even RBIs because it's runs batted in, so it's RBI whether it's plural or singular.
Hmm.
Yeah, we had conversations about this. Uh, I
Hockey
think
thoroughbred,
I think the better comparison here is Mitch Marner in Toronto.
right?
The Leafs replaced Mitch Marner's cap hit with 4 or 5 players.
Hmm.
And they were convinced that it was going to make them a better team because they would have more depth and they would be top to bottom a more like a deeper team, a team that they can count on more. It's November, and the biggest player of those five, Matthias Michelli, has already been a healthy scratch.
Hmm.
So if you tell me that we're going to replace Artemi Panarin with four players making a combined $12 million a year, I don't think this team's going to be any better for it, because I would rather pay 12 million for Artemi Panarin putting up 90 points than pay 12 million for four players who combine for 120.
Hmm.
Because that one player that gets you 90 points is infinitely more valuable and instrumental to your team's success than those other players are. So
Yeah.
here's my question to you. The team
Hmm.
with Aaron is barely a playoff team. How bad are they going to
Hmm.
be without them next year?
Well, it's funny. Yeah. Like when you say that, I think that's what a lot of fans like. I think a lot of the discourse, the kind of knee jerk reactions, the like visceral anger online, I think it settles down to one thing, and that's really organizational leadership and what's the direction. And
Yeah.
although we could argue about what John Davidson or Jeff Gorton, the way they operated, they made it very clear. And I also think some fans are anticipating that it will be at some point made clear, but so far we haven't had that answer. Drury signs a multi, you know, year extension in the spring. Um, with the Panarin deal up, it kind of personifies the question, which is what's the direction after this? So, like you're saying, what's to me without Panarin, this team is like a wild card team right now. Without him, I can't even imagine. And especially since there's really no one on the market that you can just, throw it a bag at.
And
Now that
this is already Drury's team, right? Because I see Ranger fans say that too, like, oh, this is still Gorton's team. No,
no, this is Chris Drury's team.
the only player currently on a contract that existed when Drury took over is Artemi Panarin. Everyone else has been extended, signed, or traded for by Chris
Hmm.
Drury.
Yes, especially the defense. Like he restructured that last TDL.
Yeah, and Zibanejad signed his extension under Drury, October
So
2020.
did Fox a week later.
Fox, Lafreniere, of course, his 7-year deal was handed out by Drury. So this is 100% Chris Drury's team, no question.
Hmm. Now, with that, you mentioned next season, 26, 27. I know maybe we're jumping the gun and getting ahead of ourselves here, but as this conversation's gone along, the thing that comes to mind too is like Gabe Perreault, prospect development. Obviously, that's in your neck of the woods and an area of your interest. If our say the situations are Artemi Panarin, because I hate doing hypotheticals, but do you think that frees up an opportunity for young guys, or do you think it's still going to be plugged by a veteran?
Um, it depends on how you view this organization's ability to give young players a chance.
Hmm.
Um, and also the player Gabriel Perreault is. Like, he's a phenomenal prospect. Probably a top 15 prospect in the NHL right now, still.
Hmm.
And that's including guys that went top 5 over the last 2 years. Um, he's still a phenomenal prospect. The only downside of Perot's game is that he's not the biggest and he's not the fastest. You can usually get away with one of those. If you
Hmm.
are 5'11", but you are really quick, fine, you can make it in the NHL. If you are the fastest player, if you are like a top 10 fastest player in the league, um, but you're 5'10", yeah, you can do things. Look at Noah Laba and the way he uses his skating and his speed, and we're talking about a fourth round pick who went undrafted in 2021, and the impact he has on the ice just by being faster than everyone else, right? Perot's challenge is going to be to make it work in the NHL without being the most physical and without being the fastest skater on the ice. And the NHL in 2025 is more about speed than it has ever been. That's
Hmm.
my only concern with Perot.
Do you think
So,
I mean, it seems at least under Sullivan, he wants to put players in positions where they'll succeed.
mm,
Um, And it's funny, like the different phrases or terminology with rebuild, retool. Um, I think they're obviously extremely subjective. I think there's some concrete barriers to some of them, but not every single one that's thrown out there. I mean, what would you classify what the Rangers are in right now as? I think they're competing, but we certainly know there's a lot of change on the fly. How much of that is on the decision for Artemi Panarin?
I think right now the Rangers are doubling down on a system that's not going to get them a Stanley Cup.
Mm,
Their window is closing, and they are trying to get the most out of the prime careers of Fox and Shesterkin.
mhm,
Uh, but I don't think the Rangers have what it takes, either on the roster or in the organization, to be better than the teams that they've lost to in the playoffs over the last couple of years. Like the Florida Panthers, you can look at where they are in the standings. I don't care. The Florida Panthers are going to be a playoff team, and they are
mhm,
going to be competitive in a best of seven against anyone with or without home ice advantage. Right?
mm,
The Rangers, I don't know if you feel this too as a Ranger fan, but when they are in the playoffs, it always feels like it has to be they have to win games the hardest way possible.
mhm.
When they swept the Capitals 2 seasons ago, it almost felt like something I've never experienced before,
Yeah.
right? Because it's always game seven. It's always game seven, no matter who they play, right? Whether it's the Penguins or the Carolina Hurricanes in 2022, the Carolina Hurricanes in 2024. It's they always have to make it eh, the hardest way possible to get through a best of seven series.
Mhm,
And if like without Panarin, uh, we might have to look at whether this Rangers team is even good enough to make the playoffs.
mhm,
So yeah, I don't I think this core right now with Trocheck, Zibanejad, Miller, and Fox is already 27. He's getting up there. He's going towards 30 now. Um, Sheshorkin, I think, is already 30. Or
mhm.
turning 30 next month. Um, I just don't think this team has what it takes. And I know this sounds very doom and gloom, but I don't watch this team to see them win a cup. I watch this team to see how far they get.
Mhm.
So
That's a fair assessment. No, I totally understand. And it's funny you mentioned like the watch value too. Some of the games I've been on the road when they were playing, so I unfortunately couldn't see. Like I've counted how many games, I actually saw them score a goal. Now, obviously, that's a story that again only the Rangers could come up with home ice this
yeah,
season. But
and
like you said, it feels like most nights, like you're seeing like, is this going to be a night that it all starts to click, or you're not really looking at it like, all right, how far can this team really get to a Stanley Cup and a championship?
yeah, and like I said, I don't think they are as bad as their home record makes them look. I
Hmm.
also think they're as good as their road record looks. It's
Hmm.
they're somewhere in between, and the question is, are they closer to their home record or closer to their road record?
Hmm.
And and a lot of this will depend on how this team does. And Sullivan's been great so far this season. His system has brought out the best of Will Borgen, who I still don't think is like he has to show this to me for 2 years straight before I comfortably call him a top four defenseman on a playoff team. But early returns on the Sullivan coaching tenure have been positive in that regard. Um, but if even Sullivan can get the most out of the forwards that they have, who is?
Yeah.
Because because and here's the other thing, right? Expected goals. I understand how it's calculated. I know why people talk about it because they're called their underlying numbers. We're at game 21 or 22. At some point, expected goals have to turn into actual goals for me to care about it. You know,
Yeah.
they don't plan a parade through the Canyon of Heroes and they don't hang a banner for leading the league in expected goals.
Hmm.
That's that's not a thing. So actual goals have to come at some point. And hopefully I'm wrong, but with this top six, I just don't see that happening.
Mm. For someone that's handle starts with stat, I really appreciate that you said that because I was trying to find that middle ground of, there are advanced stats that help give us a better picture of things overall. But at the end of the day, when you're sitting down and watching the hockey game, it's puck in net. Um, and I think that's been interesting too to see how the PK and power play numbers have flipped in the last few weeks. Johnny just tweeted that today,
Yeah,
this or yesterday.
I think it's
That
November.
since November 9th, like they've completely flipped on special teams. It seems also trite the last few coach hires were like to get the most out of the top players. How much, I always ask this question to my co-host, but like not necessarily blame, but how much responsibility do you put on the players, the management, or the head coach the last few seasons? So,
Well, it's hard to blame the coaches when we are now on coach number 4 for this group of players in most cases, right?
mm,
I think David Quinn and Gerard Gallant had their blind spots. Peter Laviolette put us through the best season in franchise history. Very happy with that. But then the second season, everything fell apart. But there was a
mhm,
lot of off ice issues too. There was the Truba situation. There was the leaked WhatsApp message of Chris Drury saying he wanted to get rid of Chris Kreider. Um,
mhm,
there was the Four Nations break that just broke everything up. So there was a lot going on for for you to blame it on just the players or just the coach or just the GM.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, look, Mike Sullivan is the coach that Drury wanted from day one in 2021. He finally has
mhm,
a shot. He's had 4 years to put together a team. Um, and this is where now the results have to reflect what happens with Chris Drury as a general manager, because ultimately general managers have to produce results.
mhm,
Um, and like I said earlier, I don't think this team has the prospect pool, the assets in the organization to to flip this over from an aging team to a young team,
mhm,
right? We don't have, aside from Adam Fox, we don't have any players that age wise are in their prime. We have players
mhm,
either under 25 or over 30.
mhm,
But when you look at the teams that are competitive in the playoffs, that go to Stanley Cup finals, their best players are usually 25, 26, 27, 28, 29.
mhm,
And here's the thing. Our older players are gonna get worse because Father Time is undefeated. Our young players are not getting better to the point where they can bridge that gap. That's my
yeah.
biggest concern with this organization.
Yeah, no, Alexi Lafreniere is looking into it like he's making 10 million with his bonuses this year. And I mean, even folks usually refer to contract without even acknowledging that with the signing bonuses, he's at double digits in millions, like, which is, crazy to think that the conversation's still about like reaching potential. Um, yeah, you know what? I also think, as you mentioned, players in their prime. Um, Even though Igor Shesterkin came into the league a little bit later, um, it still feels like right now is his prime. Um, I know obviously this is like such a hot topic, and I feel like every night, no matter what the result is, it's thrown around. But at this point, are you satisfied with Shesterkin's play under the new deal?
I think there are games where he can be better, but when your team only scores one goal, it's hard to complain about the goaltending.
Hmm. Lundqvist effect.
That's the thing, right? We would lose 4-1 with Lundqvist in that, and there would be Ranger fans going, "Oh, Lundqvist sucked tonight." Yeah, but you only scored one goal.
Hmm.
Like, you get shut out by the Islanders at home 5-0, and it's like, oh, I cannot believe Shesterkin gave up 4 goals because one of them was an empty netter, I think. Yeah, but you get shut out. Like,
Hmm.
that's not the conversation to have. You
Yeah.
know,
Wow, you're hitting all the right notes tonight. That's for sure.
there's this. I forget the quote. I think it's from the TV show House, where he goes, you wake up in the morning, the water's boiling, the wallpaper's coming off the walls, there's smoke everywhere. What do you do first? Like, you run out of the fucking house because the house is on fire, right?
Mhm.
And we can focus on Shesterkin all we want, and yes, he needs to be better. He's not playing up to the 11.5 million he gets, but I'm not going to talk about the goalie when we get shut out by the Islanders, or when we go
Yeah.
1-8-1 at home to start the season, where you could the game against the Sharks where you lose 6-5. Yeah, you can talk about the goaltending.
Mhm.
Which brings me to another point. Taylor Radish, I think, is still second on the team in scoring,
Yeah, he hasn't scored since the end of October, where he led the team.
but he's still second on the team in goals. A guy that has not scored in a month.
Yeah,
Like, that is symptomatic. That is a perfect example of something being wrong with your offense.
symbolic, right?
Yeah, yeah, and look, I was very harsh on Radish early in the season. I called him rubbish jokingly, and not because I don't like him. It's because he's a fourth liner, and he was on our third line, and then he scored a hat trick, and he was on our top line. If Radish is in your top nine, you're not a good team. Same
Mm.
with Shearer, by the way, but that's another conversation with a whole different layer of complaints to that. But the Rangers just don't have top to bottom a team that I consider uh, uh, even a wild card team. When Perot was on the team and Cooley was on the third line, that was the first time this season where the first line looked like a first line, the second line looked like a second line, the third looked like a third, and the fourth looked like a fourth.
Mhm.
But if Morgan gets injured, the only option you have to call up Morrow is to send down Perot. So it throws everything, for a loop. Yeah, injuries haven't helped, but I think there are much bigger issues than just injuries and line changes. And um, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is either, but hey, I don't get paid to figure it out. So
That's right. Yeah, I always say it's funny. It's like, well, we could present and talk about the problems, but the solutions are for the future, to see how all things untangle.
yeah,
Is
and
there a stat? Oh,
uh,
sorry, Steve.
sorry, this is the thing with Chris Drury, right? When you
Mhm.
criticize Drury and someone goes, "Oh, you think you know better?" No, but I don't get paid 4 million a year or whatever he gets paid to make these decisions, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
could have told you in 2021 that signing Patrick Nemeth was a bad idea.
Mhm.
I could have told you that the Buchnevich trade for a second round pick and Sammy Blay was going to age poorly. I don't need to
Mhm.
be a general manager in the NHL to make that observation, right?
Yeah.
And fans are allowed to have opinions and should be allowed to voice their opinions. And and another thing, and then we'll continue. But the thing I hate the absolute most on social media is where you have an opinion and someone goes, "Well, did you ever play hockey?"
Mm.
No, I was never a Formula One driver either. That doesn't mean I can't drive to work. Doesn't mean I
I like that. That's
work.
good.
Just because you played hockey doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about. We can all make
Mhm.
observations. We're all watching the same game, and it's okay to disagree without throwing that stuff out there. Just wanted to get that off my chest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like in the position when you're in management, it's all, well, a majority of it is really big gambles. And, as you said, with voicing opinions, like obviously in today's day and age, there is a megaphone for that where there wasn't in the past. And I do think like it players and people who have played and then gone on to different levels certainly have an understanding of those levels and maybe some things on the interior,
Mhm.
but it doesn't change, that like a valuable opinion can't come from anybody. So especially, people like us, we're watching every night and, crunching numbers and looking into things. So as you said, some things, major gambles, especially like that Nemeth move. Um, but at the end of the day, we'll see kind of, I don't really know the direction of the ship right now. Pretty foggy waters.
Yeah, and what makes it even more frustrating is that this is probably the worst the Eastern Conference has looked in years.
Yeah, I think any team that can get in can probably at least make a run to the
Yeah.
conference final.
There just isn't it isn't like previous years where you had a clear top five, top six.
Mhm.
Eastern Conference is all over the place. And
Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah,
Rangers
this year for sure.
need to find out a way to capitalize on that if they want to make the playoffs. Because
Mhm.
um, losing to the Red Wings, which by the way, the best jersey matchup I've seen in a regular
Oh, yeah.
season.
I'm
Uh,
all for that. Like, that stuff I love.
oh yeah, quickly on that. Um, when colors don't clash, let both teams wear their colors. Like
Mhm.
Bruins in black against the Canadians in red would be amazing.
Mhm.
Penguins against the Flyers, orange versus black. Rangers against the Devils, blue versus red. Why are we not seeing this more often? The Blues
Mhm.
against the Blackhawks, the Lightning against the Panthers, or the Rangers against the Panthers in the Winter Classic could have been one of those. Uh, but yeah, look, the Rangers in the Eastern Conference are not in. I don't think they're in a wild card spot right now. And the real question is, what is more likely for this team to happen? That they play better at home, or that they fall off on the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. A lot of these things are so glass half full, glass half empty, right? I would say probably falling off on the road. Right now, they have 22 points, so they're tied with the Caps and Jackets. But like, you earn a win tonight. I mean, that would be a Herculean task. But you're tied with Pittsburgh and the Islanders, and you're sitting in third, tied
Yeah,
for third. So it's
yeah,
just pretty crazy. I feel like every night when we're looking at the standings, like it really would only take a 3-game win streak to get into the top of the Metro.
yeah. I think looking at the standings in November is always a fool's game, but January
Oh
is
yeah, for sure.
January is usually where you get a good idea of what the standings look like, except for the
Hmm.
Blues in 2019, of course. That's still one of the wildest runs I've ever seen a team make. Um, if you're in a wild card spot in January, yeah, you can probably overcome the deficiencies that this team has. And
Hmm.
I also wonder what Drury's going to do at the deadline. You have the Olympic break right before. Hopefully, no one
Hmm.
gets hurt. Um, what do you do at the deadline? Are you going to be buyers with 2 first-round picks? Or are you going to be sellers and hope that Panarin waives his no move clause, accept the fact that you're not going to be in it this year and get a return for him? Because here's the thing: if Panarin is not staying in New York, they have to do everything in their power to get something for him at the deadline.
Oh, 100%.
And
We
and
saw that. We saw. I think that was the big fumble, right, with Rantanen and Marner was the holdout.
yeah, yeah. Well, Rantanen was traded twice in before the deadline, which is still one of the craziest things I've
That
seen.
was insane.
Um, but yeah, if Claude Giroux can return a first-round pick and Owen Tippett, if Brock Nelson can return a first-round pick and Cal Ritchie, then Artemi Panarin should get you more than that, like a first-round pick, a top prospect, a
The
roster
Rick
player.
Nash deal, right? That's what it comes to mind for. And he was an aged. He was
Yeah,
like at that point a two-way player.
he was a little younger, I think, than Panarin is right now. But Panarin is. Here's the thing with Panarin: if a team like Florida adds Panarin to their team, it's going to be better than Tarasenko when he was on their team. He's going to be on their third line. He's
Hmm.
going to feast on teams when he's on a third line. When you have the depth
Yeah.
where Panarin is
Yep.
not a top six forward, you're going to cruise to another Stanley Cup.
Hmm.
So hopefully Panarin sees that too, and he wants to have a crack at a Stanley Cup because he hasn't won one yet. Because remember, he signed with the Blackhawks in 2015 after they won their last cup. Um, so yeah, we'll have to wait and see how the season unfolds. But it's we could be sitting here 2 weeks from now and have a completely different conversation based on how the games go. So
Yeah. It felt that way after the Nashville and Tampa games. Like the conversations we were having were just
yeah,
completely different.
they fixed everything. They've righted the ship. They're
Yeah.
going to build on this. and then they didn't. Yeah,
Winning cures all
yeah, for a little bit, Yeah,
for a little bit. That's
it's
right. That's right. In the long run, right?
it's
Was
kind of
there,
like
Steve?
it's kind
Was
of
there? Is there a stat right now, maybe that you're, um, like sitting on, letting simmer, or that you're keeping an eye on over time that like really interests you?
um. Well, I have something, and the longest winless streak in a third jersey by a team in the NHL to start. The Rangers are currently 0-4 in their Centennial jerseys. They have, I think, how many games do they have left? 6. Yeah, there were 8 themed nights, then opening night, and the last home game. So they have 6 more games in their Centennial jersey, which I think is ridiculous. It should have just been the jersey for the whole season.
Yeah, like
They
Boston.
Yeah, I'm like, well, Boston did it even better. Boston introduced 3 jerseys for the season,
Yeah.
away and third. But yeah, they have 6 games left in their Centennial jersey. Um, I will, at the end of the season, I will put together a tweet with the worst records in third jerseys by NHL teams.
Mm.
Uh, and so far, it's not looking good for the Rangers. So
Oh boy. I know
yeah.
you were really on top of the goal lists, the record for the shutouts at home. Like that was
Mhm.
like waiting for New Year's the ball to drop. So yeah, I know. Obviously, there's always like one or two things that seem to perpetually be going, and we'll have to keep an eye on that one.
The other thing is, 'cause actually it was brought up on Elliot Friedman's podcast a while ago, but I've tweeted about this in the past too. Number of goals conceded by teams from former players. Because the Rangers, since 2017, the Rangers comfortably lead that. That's one thing where the feeling is actually true. So
Oh yeah.
I'm keeping an eye on that, and I'll probably do an update at the end of the season for that stat as well.
Do you have one on first? I feel like the Rangers fan 101 textbook is like expect goals from former players,
Mhm.
expect the unexpected is probably number one. I guess that's across all sports, but really for the Rangers, it seems like there's always really crazy twists. And then, of course, the other one is first goals, first career NHL goals. Do you have numbers on that at all?
I'd have to look up the current numbers, but last season, the last time I looked this up, the Devils were number one. They gave
Okay.
up. Ottawa Senators were 2. I think the Islanders were 3, or the Dallas Stars. Dallas Stars, Islanders, I think were 3 and 4. The Rangers at the time ranked 19th. So that's
Oh,
one of those.
wow.
That's one of those things where the perception doesn't meet reality. It's
Yeah.
not as bad as we think it is. So
That's
um,
pretty crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty often. So, I
two.
actually, I think I'd known that the Islanders and Devils were up there, and it's funny when you think, like that tri-state road trip, how many players are getting their first career goals then? It's like,
That's, yeah.
the 1, the 3, and the 19. I mean, you have a pretty good shot.
Do you know the 2 players on the current roster that scored their first career goal against the Rangers?
Well, Artemi Panarin, and he scored his first career hat trick against the Rangers. And then
Aaron is one.
uh it's got to be, a player that's come in. So obviously, let's think. I'm thinking quick before I don't want to take too long, obviously, but first career goal. Is it
He joined the Rangers
Vincent
last.
Trocheck?
No, it's Juuso Parssinen.
Oh my goodness, I remember that Nashville and Filipino scored in that game. It was
Yep.
like a November game. Nashville won. He scored 2 goals that game too. The first he like dipped the shoulder, right? I thought he was like a beast. The way they were talking about him that game was that he was like, if he can find, play to that, like play bigger than he is, and that's why I think at the time that they made that trade last year, I was like, all right. I thought Borgen, I wasn't like super high on, but I liked at least the return that they got for Kako.
The second and the fourth
Whereas,
pick were
yeah,
also great. Yeah.
I thought Parsons' ceiling maybe was a little bit higher than it was based on that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the Rangers are not that bad at giving up first career goals. It's we can sleep a little easier knowing that at least.
Yeah. So, I mean, coming up, is there anything outside of like kind of the same trends that everyone's looking at with this team that you're really focusing on?
Um, well, I'm always looking forward to the World Juniors to see which Ranger prospects are in those games. Of course, that's not
Hmm.
really related to the Rangers team at the moment, but that's always fun
Yeah,
to look at. The Olympics. My wife and I are actually flying to Italy to go to a handful of games. First
that's
time with
awesome.
us back at the Olympics since 2014. And then in April, we're going to do a round to see all three Centennial teams play a home game. So we're going to go Rangers, Red Wings, and Blackhawks on a road
That
trip.
is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, really looking forward to that. From a Rangers perspective, I I really want to see how Laba does the rest of the season. I don't think he's going to go down to Hartford. I think he's sticking for the rest of the season. And who the next Ranger prospect is that's going to make his NHL debut. We've had Smelar's making his debut, of course, a couple of weeks ago. Um, I personally think the next one will be Dylan Rubrick. Um,
Hmm.
if there is an injury on the fourth line, he can play wing, he can play center. He would give Carrick a second option for faceoffs. Big guy, 6'7", really good
Another
skater.
big guy. Yeah.
Uh, Scored 20 goals last year in the AHL as a rookie, so there's offensive upside too. Um, yeah, and then from the Rangers' perspective, I just want to enjoy Gavrikov Fox as a top pair. I don't think we talk about that enough. We talk a lot about the negatives on this team, but I have to
Mhm.
remind myself every once in a while that we did sign Gavrikov and that he is the best left-handed defenseman, at least in the last 25 years. I think he's better than McDonough ever was as a Ranger
You
defensively.
know what's funny? I said the last show we did here, I said it's funny, like no one talks about him at all, and it's because he's always making the right plays. It is incredible. You know what?
Yeah.
I like what you said. I think I am 24, so I can't say for 20 years, but certainly in the last decade, from the experience I can speak to, he's definitely the best. And there's never a point in a game, at least thus far, where there's been a mistake um, that ended up in the back of the net or a mistake that resulted in, you know, a, a momentum swing in a game when he's on the ice. And
If
obviously that speaks to, with the way the NHL right now is with scoring, like it is really impressive. I was really impressed with him a few years back, and I was hoping the Rangers would be in on him
when he was
before
in
he went to
Columbus,
LA, right?
yeah, yeah. The thing with Gavrikov is, and you touched on it. If your top pair shutdown defenseman is not talked about, that is a really good thing.
Oh
Because
yeah.
if he's noticeable as a shutdown defenseman, it's because he's making mistakes.
Hmm.
But you never hear his name. I think he scored a goal a couple of games ago. It was his first goal with the
Two.
Rangers.
He's got two on the season.
Oh, he's got two on the season. But yeah, like I love that Adam Fox for the first time in his career has a shutdown defenseman next to him, like a good one.
Mhm. Yeah.
As much as I love Ryan Lindgren, he was never a top pair defenseman.
Hmm.
Like realistically, if we take away all the bias and the fandom, and you look at Ryan Lindgren as a player, he was never a top pair defenseman. Just like Dan
Hmm.
Giroux was never a top pair defenseman. But when you don't have anyone better to play in that position, players are usually elevated to a spot where they are a little bit in over their head. And with
Hmm.
Gavrikov, that's not the case at all. And for Gavrikov too, Adam Fox is the best defenseman he's ever had. So they're kind
Yes,
of they're kind of elevating each other's games here.
which is exciting.
Yes.
I think part of the reason it's not maybe talked about as much is, obviously one of those X factors heading into the year was like, is Adam Fox going to return to form, or is Adam Fox going to improve upon the last two seasons? Maybe more so the playoff run and then last season. Um, and I still don't feel we've seen the best of Fox yet this year. Maybe that's a good thing, but I'm hoping it's trending in the right direction.
It's he's better than he was last season. I do think
Mhm.
getting a full off season to recover, to work on his stamina, to work on his physique has helped. Um, but I'm getting close to the point where I'm accepting the fact that we have seen the best seasons of Adam Fox's career already, and that I
Okay.
hate to say that about a 27-year-old player, but
Yeah.
he should have won a second Norris in 2023 when Eric Carlson won it. That
Mhm.
that that should have been Adam Fox's second Norris. After 22-23, he was never the same. He had that injury in November of 23 where he was
Mhm.
out a couple of weeks, and then he had another injury last season. This is the first season since 22-23 where he's actually healthy. So I don't know, maybe it'll come. But I think this is the best the Rangers defense has looked in years too. Let's be honest. Like
Mhm.
offensively, there's a lot to complain about. Defensively, not so much.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Adam Fox's injuries. I had the chance at that point, I was reporting on the team and I asked him directly, have you ever been injured before? Have you ever dealt with long-term injury? He never dealt with a long-term injury in his entire hockey career. Now, it's funny, most folks forget that like a Will Cooley was at one point the best scorer in a league. So like he understands what that's like now, not at the NHL level, but he understands what it's like to score. Um, that's really shocked me that Adam Fox had never dealt with a long-term injury, and I think that was probably a really like a learning curve for him to not only understand the full recovery process for a month's long knee injury, but also the process of being away from the rink, the process of re-aggravating it. So I do think in a lot of ways that kind of was a gray cloud overhead. But like you're saying, do we see the best out of Adam Fox now that he's really getting to that age 30 mark? I mean, how old was McDonough when he had left the team?
Uh,
30, maybe a little bit before then.
89, I think he was drafted in '07, so he's born in '89, and we traded him in 2018, so 29.
Okay,
Yeah. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
it's pretty
Look,
incredible to think Foxy's got 2 seasons until that point. But
and then at that point, he only has 2 years left on his deal, I think, because that contract
y-
is coming up
yep,
sooner than we think as well. But yeah, look, Adam Fox, and this is the other thing that we need to touch on with Adam Fox, right? Even though he's not playing as well as he has in the past, he's still a top 10 defenseman in the league.
yeah,
The problem is we want him to be top three
mm,
because we know he can be because he's done it in the past. The
hmm
expectation set by Adam Fox at an early in his career by winning a
hmm
Norris second year, by being a perennial Norris finalist, those expectations were set by him. That's what we hold him to. And
hmm
we can argue whether that's fair or not because he's not the player he was 3, 4 years ago. But those are the expectations. And if he is a top 10 player in the league, he's still really good, but it's not where we want him to be.
hmm
I
Yeah,
think
and I usually what I say, Steve, is I say like a player has to me a ceiling and a floor. Like
yeah,
Connor McDavid's floor is still probably, if
three.
not the number one, top three, top five, right?
Yeah.
But Adam Fox, you're right. I think it's a little more volatile. Like at his best, he's top three, and he's in that McCarr Hughes conversation. I still think Kale McCarr is number one. But what we've seen the last few seasons, I know a lot of people were critical of NHL Network labeling him number 15, but I certainly think he's in the top 10 or down to the 10 spot. I think that's a good observation.
I don't think he was 15. I do think he was closer to 15 than he was to three, if we're
Hmm
being brutally honest. With the season he had, with how he was exposed in the Four Nations, I think
hmm
that played a huge role as well. Um,
Yeah.
the Four Nations really affected the image that Adam Fox has as a player in the NHL, and it's going to
They're
take some
still
time.
talking about it with the Olympics.
Exactly, and it's going to take some time to erase that from people's memories, right? If you ever will be able to do that, but I think 15th was a little harsh, but still, like 10th, 11th, I would have been okay with that. I think right now the Gavrikov Fox pairing is number one in the league. As a pairing, they're better than Taves Makar. Makar's better than Fox,
I could see
but
that, especially the defensive side of the puck, right? That you're getting from Gavrikov.
Makar's better than Fox, but Gavrikov is way better than Taves. And I like
Hmm.
Taves. Taves is a really good defenseman. But
Yeah.
Gavrikov is a top three, top five shutdown defenseman in the league. The
Hmm.
only two shutdown defensemen I would take over Gavrikov are probably Forsling and Slavin. That's it.
Yep.
Those are the only two where I can confidently say they're better than Gavrikov.
And Forsling's really been the last few seasons, and not, of course, it doesn't change the amazing things he's done,
Oh,
but
but
um,
Forsling was claimed off waivers from Chicago,
yeah, which is incredible.
or was it Carolina? One of the two. But
I
Forsling
think
was
it was the Charlotte Checkers.
yeah. So he
So at the
was
time, I think, yeah, like
he was
Carolina's AHL.
yeah. So he was claimed off waivers, which is even crazier.
Hmm.
That an organization like the Carolina Hurricanes did not identify the defensive pedigree in a player, considering
Hmm.
how good they are with developing defensemen.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Forsling and Slavin, I think, are the only two where I could confidently say they're better than Gavrikov. Other than that, I don't trust any player more than Gavrikov on my top pair to make a defensive play. He's so good with his stick too. That's
Hmm.
he breaks up plays before other defensemen even think about making a play. Like his stick work is easily the best attribute about him.
Hmm.
He's I cannot believe we got him for 7 million a year.
Yeah, and what's great about that is with the potential. I always say potential because I never trust the league. The cap going up. Um, that will be huge. You mentioned Fox has a few more years at the rate the Rangers are getting him at, his price tag, and I do think it's funny. Like, that's also, like you mentioned, there's a lot of the negative things, but also there are some good things, and one of those is like you pretty much moved Miller and you got Morrow, Pick, Gabrikov out of that money. So, I don't know what your feelings were about Keandre Miller beforehand, but I mean, I would take Gabrikov as your top shutdown D over re-signing Miller on seeing what his potential or ceiling was for that price.
Yeah, I think with Keandre Miller at 7.5, I would not have wanted that contract, but we do have to admit that they have not replaced the offense
Yeah.
or the puck moving ability that Keandre Miller brought to this team.
Hmm.
I'm Gavrikov is great, but on your second pair next to Borgen, you want a guy who can move the puck out of the zone.
Hmm.
Keandre Miller is great at that. He might not be great defensively, but with the puck, he's really good. And
Hmm.
that's something that the Rangers are a little bit missing on their blue line. Adam Fox is the only defenseman that can confidently move the puck out of the zone.
Hmm.
And that's a bit of a problem. Like defensively, they're really good, but this also plays into their lack of offense. We always talk about
Yeah, 100%.
how the forwards are responsible for the defense, but the defensemen are also responsible for the offense by breaking out the puck fast. And the system, this is the other conversation I had. Someone asked me why Panarin doesn't have as many breakaways as he had last season, and I think that is because of the system Sullivan wants them to play. Um, the Sullivan system doesn't allow forwards to sneak up the ice, to cheat up the ice. Whereas in
Hmm.
previous years, you would see players, the moment the defenseman got possession of the puck, they would skate up the ice. They'd go, they'd bolt. And you get two or three steps on your opponent. When you then get the puck, it's great. You get a 2-on-1, you score on that breakaway.
Hmm.
Current system doesn't allow for that because it's a much tighter system where the forwards have to contribute more defensively, so they don't have that first two or three steps on the defenseman when there's a breakout pass.
Hmm.
So we're sacrificing offense for defense. if that makes sense.
Yeah, and obviously that was an area that they wanted to clean up, but, like you said, part of it is moving the puck out, right? Offense starts with the breakout, but it's not only those indirect passes, the precision on that, and moving puck to stick, tape to tape, but it's also quarterbacking. And, as you mentioned, I don't even think Adam Fox is a smart passer, but there were times this season, towards the end of the game, it might have been against Detroit. Panarin up the same side, essentially, for lack of better terms, like sideline up that side of the rink. Fox was looking for Panarin at the blue line, sent a pass. Now, part of the responsibilities on Panarin, but to me, it was also like a rushed play. I think the Rangers at that point were pretty panicked. There was less than a minute left. But I do think there are times where even for Fox, like he's not the fastest, and we know that. So he's the most reliable passer, but I also don't think he's the most reliable puck carrier. And Miller had the size too to pair with that. So
And
it is
and
interesting, and we'll see how things work out, I guess, with Miller and Carolina.
yeah, and this whole like sacrificing offense for defense is great in a vacuum when you realize you need better defense. But I feel that with Drury, it's always an overcorrection. You know,
Okay.
we
Yeah.
always a little too far, and that's what I feel with this team as well. Where trading for Susie, getting rid of Miller, signing Gavrikov, which no one disagrees with that part, but um, right now not trusting Scott Morrow on the defense, right? Where you only play him 9 minutes when he's in the lineup. Um,
Hmm.
if you're not going to play him, then don't call him up, right? If you're not going
Hmm.
to trust him after making one bad play, then don't call him up. Let him play in Hartford. But with Drury, it always feels like an overcorrection where that's probably my biggest concern with Panarin. If Panarin walks in the summer, what is Drury going to do with that cap space?
Yeah.
I'm a
And
little.
I think again, like that personifies where the organization is at right now.
Are you going to pay Alex Tuck 9 million a year to put up
Yeah.
40 points when he's already in the 30s? I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong, but Chris Drury does not fill me with confidence when it comes to this free agency class. That's all.
Hmm.
I hope that he makes a trade for a big contract, where you give up a first round pick, maybe Gabriel Perreault, for a guy who's 24, 25, already on a big deal, who you can still get the prime years out of it, right?
Hmm.
That be the ideal scenario if you want to go all in with this team, rather than spending money on a guy that's either in his 30s or close to 30 for the next 7 years.
Yeah. And the draft classes, I mean, the free agent class is, you
It's not
know,
good. It's not,
Ovechkin, Panarin, you mentioned Tuck, like they're players that, are established, but they're playing the back nine right now.
yes, those are not players that will fix the problem the Rangers are having. They don't fill a need for this team. That
Hmm.
was my concern. So
Well, Steve, it was a pleasure to have you on. This was by far one of the most fun conversations I've had since we started doing this show. And obviously, I know we'll keep in touch across the internet wave. So I'll be looking forward to your the continued success of your pregame. What's that called? It's not radio.
it's a Twitter space.
Space. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's Twitter, X, whatever. So
they call
yeah,
it Twitter.
no, it was a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, I might be an old man by still calling it Twitter, but I can't call it X. It's sorry.
I know. I call it Twitter too. It's funny. I think even like online, you have to type in Twitter to get there if you go on the search engines like Google or whatever. So
But no, it was fun to be on, and yeah, we need to do this again sometime.
yeah, I really appreciate it. And like I said, it felt like years in the making. So for sure. And we'll have to keep up with that stat on the Centennial jerseys. Hopefully it changes by the next time we talk, but we'll have to see.
Let's hope so.
All right, Steve. Have a good night.
You too.